What do you like to do with your brothers?
Together, we can do anything.
We're here to restore justice to the Wrestling Federation that our father built with his own two hands. The hands that were passed down to us. The hands that will deliver the Iron Claw to you.
This is a fairly conventional, very well done drama. And I don't think it's completely without its faults. There's some sort of hokiness with some of the dialogue. There's some very jarring, obvious trimming of the movie's running time. I could definitely tell. There's definitely some footage on the cutting room floor with this one, but other than that, I think most of all, this acts as a showcase of Zac Efron. I think this film finally puts to bed those sad few people who still hold on to High School Musical, or hold it over the guy's head as they did with Twilight and Robert Pattinson. And so if you are one of those people who in the year 2024 is still wondering if Zac Efron can act, I think the answer is yes. After this film, he can. Welcome to Theater and Stream, a film podcast. I am Matt, and that is Chuck, and this is episode 35. Before we close the door completely on 2023, we're covering everything we missed from the year that was. That's going to include a big watch list and a featured review of Sean Durkin's wrestling biopic, The Iron Claw. All of which we'll get to, but not before we say goodbye to another beloved actor no longer with us, and then bringing up the rear of the show, and as a tease for our Best of 2023 minisode next week, Chuck and I will name our Mentionables of the year. All that's coming at you at the next hour and change. Timestamps are in the episode description. Please subscribe if you like what you see. Rate us on the podcast service if you like what you hear. But that's the business end of the show. Chuck, take it away.
So glad to be back here. I almost forgot what time we typically do this at, since we've switched to the 2 weeks on minisode schedule. But yeah, sad news. It's like every day, I think it was Trixie Mattel, the drag queen, said that Twitter is an evil thing because every day you just wake up and you see that someone you love has died. And that's kind of how this feels, because Tom Wilkinson was one of those guys. You could reliably plug him into any role. He'd fucking deliver. He'd be really fucking convincing. He'd give it his all. I don't think this dude ever phoned anything in. And it's just a big fat bummer that he's no longer with us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he died in his home suddenly. He was 75. What I kind of remember about him is his presence was always very menacing, especially for a small guy. Tom Wilkinson was a pretty small dude. He was always menacing or regal or both. He often played bad guys or aristocratic figures in period pieces, but he had kind of slowed down as of late. I was looking at his filmography, and his time between roles, started to become measured in years as of late, where, it'd be a year or two between each role. But he was an actor who the 2000s were very, very good to. He was in Batman Begins as Carmine Falcone, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. And then probably the role that I will most remember him for, Arthur Edens in Michael Clayton, one of the best movies of the 2000s. But yeah, what is your sort of personal Tom Wilkinson pick?
It's actually the one that just flashed up on the screen, the Exorcism of Emily Rose. That was the first movie I ever saw him in and actually consciously recognized that it's that guy. And but because the Michael Clayton role you called out is probably, that's the pinnacle. That was his most powerful performance, because otherwise he just kind of had slowed down and just become a reliable cameo to be in Wes Anderson movies, because he's been acting for a long time, and his career only really picked up, especially in Hollywood, in the late 90s, 2000s era. And I can understand that he just slowing down a little bit. And he didn't have to tell us that he was doing it like some actors do. We know he's gone by his absence, you know, because there's such a length of time between his performances.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a big loss, and I think his last thing that he's credited for is that full Monty TV series, which I've heard is surprisingly good. So I might have to go check that out now that we know that it's his last thing.
Didn't even know it existed. They made a full Monty TV show? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but right here, watch Michael Clayton, people. Just like, look that up. I don't know where it's streaming now, but I remember being a teenager who grabbed this off of Netflix and whose parents were sitting aghast as he's like doing the monologue about fucking the Finnish prostitute or whatever the fuck it is. Oh, it's just burned into my brain forever. But salute, sir. We'll miss you. God dang it. We need to go a week without a in memoriam segment. That's where I'm coming from with this. But speaking of things that you probably should have an obituary written for them, let's move on to the watch list now, because is this finally the end for Zack Snyder? Has he finally fucked it up? I've spoken at length about this in the mini-sode from last week. What do you have to say about Rebel Moon, Matt?
Yeah, so go watch that mini-sode if you haven't, people. Chuck did a really good job sort of talking about his feelings on this. And I find the reaction by certain critics to this film and sort of the greater film watching community to be one of the biggest exposures of fraudulent, worthless opinions.
Ooh.
Because, what I mean by that is basically this. If you call this movie one of the worst films you've ever seen, you are a fraud. If you rate this movie 1 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd or a similar website, you are a fraud. If you're lurking in the comment sections of the internet, thumbing down on every vaguely positive comment about this film, you are a fraud. You're a fraud because you're allowing real life events of the past 5 years to sort of influence your opinion. You're confusing Zack Snyder with Zack Snyder's fans. You have it's an unfounded, vehement hatred for the guy. And now, do I think this is a very good movie? No, but it's not that bad either. And I guess what I'll say about it is it's derivative to a fault. I think that Sofia Boutella is not a good enough actor to carry a movie. It's a bit too manic in its moving from place to place. But the one thing I will say is that I think Zack Snyder is really, really good at world building, but he's not so good at lore building. And what I mean by that is there's all these things that flash by so quickly that I'm like, I want to know more about that. I want to know who that guy was. I want to know what that place was. But he sort of just flashes by things so quick. Like, I want to know what the weird parasite alien was that was attached to the guy in that bar. I want to know about that. He goes to a planet that is like a gladiator planet, like arena planet, and then he never shows the gladiator arena. He just shows Damon Hanzu being like hosed off by a woman after one of his matches. And so I want to know more about these things, but he's not giving it to me. And so that's what I mean when I say like he's good at world building. There's all these things I want to know, but he's not good at lore building.
Yeah, and that's what about Sofia Boutella. The only time she's convincing is when she's in a flashback and she's just emoting and not talking. And that's never a good sign for anyone involved, whether you're the screenwriter or the actor. Yeah, there's a lot, but I agree with a lot of what you said. And in fact, you articulated things that I left on the field with my video, because I didn't quite get into the allure. And the allure is all of the things that he teases you with and never gives you a full bite of, like you described. And that's a big like problem, but it's also part of what draws me into it and why I appreciate it, because I'm like, there's something there, but goddamn, you're not the man to crack it open and like harden it out into something useful for us. We need a proper smith to hit this piece of metal a little bit. And Yeah, but he's the artisan. We let him do his thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of putting the cart before the horse again, where I guess the promise of all these things is that they will be fleshed out in like comic books and video games and spin-off, shows and movies. But it's sort of like the same situation that we had with his DCU, where they're trying to they're trying to force a universe instead of just giving us one movie. They're trying to force like a trilogy, or they're just trying to move too fast. And I guess he even tried to do that with Army of the Dead to a certain extent, because there are those weird scenes in Army of the Dead that hint at like time travel.
Yeah.
But I don't think anything's ever gonna like come out of any of that. I mean, at this point, I think Army of the Dead is probably done. But
they got that one spin-off, and that's all that they can possibly do.
Yeah, and so it's just he's sort of putting the cart before the horse. And back in like March of 2023, before we had ever seen even a lick of footage of this movie, Zack Snyder got up on the stage at Gamescom in Europe and was like, "I'm making a Rebel Moon video game," and it just meant nothing to anyone because he hadn't shown any footage. And so and apparently that game is still supposed to come out. And then I don't know if you heard about this, but the other day, like literally like 3 days ago, there is a Rebel Moon comic book coming out on January 19th.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the promise is that these things will be fleshed out, and so hopefully, that is the case. But yeah, he's sort of just kind of putting the cart before the horse.
Like I kind of alluded to, it's that arrogance. Anybody can make a Star Wars, but you had to have that movie. Like even that first Star Wars movie wasn't ready for the merchandising. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you actually have to know that people want your thing. And when you're making something that is like, it's cribbing from so many different sources, and this guy is not a good judge of what melds well, I guess is what this kind of proves. There are parts of this that just tickle all of my 40K funny bones and give me Star Wars vibes, but like that imagery, that thing, and I guess this is like the further beef. The extended R-rated cut is where all of the things that we are hoping for are probably going to get more flesh, so there's like more, more to get a taste of. But I doubt that there's going to be as a reasonable enough response to warrant further films after part 2 comes out. And yeah, like this should have just been a 30-minute Mandalorian style TV show, and that would have probably been the better thing to try and replicate versus but yeah, Netflix wants cinema to a degree. They want to get into the actual box office, but they also like being able to decide for themselves what their metrics are, which is why it's almost better that they don't care about what the take is. But yeah, that's Rebel Moon. It's good for a throw on a Saturday if you're hungover, because at least it's something you haven't seen before, even though it will remind you of a lot of things you have. Moving on to this next one. I have a lot to fucking say about the next watch list entry. Oh my God. Because yeah, we're going to have some quick hits at the end. They're kind of out of order. I apologize for that, Matt. I think things were out of order in the system here. But Saltburn is kind of setting the conversation. Everyone missed this thing in theaters, so we're all catching it on streaming now. And good golly, Miss Molly, what the fuck is Emerald Fennell on?
Yeah, I don't know, because this is such a divisive movie. I've heard, this is a movie you either love or you hate. I could admire Promising Young Woman, her first movie. I don't agree with Emerald Fennell's politics or her sort of like moral absolutism, but I admired Promising Young Woman for the filmmaking and the performances. But this is a movie that is about reprehensible characters that really fail to endear the audience in any way, or even elicit any sense of like morbid curiosity or voyeurism. If people don't know, this is essentially a mashup of Brideshead Revisited with a very bad Succession imitation. But it's really bad at doing that because we like the characters in Succession in spite of their flaws because they're well-rounded enough to invoke some sort of, pity or charm, whatever you want to say. But this, not so much. It's oh God, the scenes in which I could literally see the scenes in which she was trying to write her like Succession-esque dialogue, and it just falls completely flat. Like Carey Mulligan's sort of intro scene when they're all sort of lounging around that like the living room, waiting to see Arthur for the first time, and they're just like, "Oh, guffaw the pores," and it's just awful. But yeah, what did you think?
It's like a perfume commercial that never ends. Like all the way up until the ending, because like the aspect ratio really fucking threw me off to start with. I really vibed with the opening thrust, with the God Save the King and the really cool animated title screen that they had going on. And then it lost me because it just got, I don't know, like its big reveal was fucking obvious from the jump, like, I don't, not to spoil it for anybody, but if you know what the score is from the moment you start watching it. And forgive me, but did we ever get like a genuine like why this guy like talented Mr. Ripley'd his way into their lives and ruined everything? Like what compelled this guy to do this? We didn't really understand enough about his inner nature to care. At least I didn't get enough, I think.
Yeah, same. I mean, I guess the assumption is he was obsessed with Jacob Elordi's character, and I don't know, like it started as like a genuine infatuation, but then once he sort of weaseled his way into his life, he sort of realized that he could bend things to his desires, I guess, but I mean, even that doesn't really make sense because there is a point in this movie where he basically gives up, when he's told to go away, when he basically accepts an untold amount of money to go away. But then he comes back solely because he sees an article in a newspaper and he's like, oh shit, I'm gonna take another crack at this. So I mean, even that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah. And I don't know, Barry Keoghan is just a little too old to be playing this character. Like, he just looked like he looked like a special needs person half the time, because like he is a dude almost our age, and he's acting like a college freshman, and it's just, it's like, imagine Leonardo DiCaprio doing this way past his sell-by date, which he kind of did with Wolf of Wall Street, but that was a fraction of the movie. Eventually he got to play someone his own age, and that doesn't happen for Keoghan in this. But the rest of the cast, I was mostly happy with. Like, they're making the most of their material. I guess, I don't know, they're phoning it in. I'll give them that. Like, they're all just walking around acting bored, rich, and like high almost like the whole time. But the fun bits of the movie for me were when they were just hanging out and being, like rich assholes, when they're doing karaoke or watching Superbad, and just like, it's like how could you people who are so stuffy that you wear suits to supper, like get any enjoyment out of low culture like that? So, but I guess that is that more the authenticity that Emerald Fennell probably grew up with coming through?
Yeah, I think so, because that's one of my biggest takeaways from this movie, or one of the only interesting angles I could find to look at this movie through. It's basically that I think this movie is sort of a repudiation of Fennell's childhood, because if people don't know, she comes from ultra rich parents. Her dad was like a luxury jewelry designer, and then her mom was a very successful author. And then she also went to Oxford, and she attended Oxford at the same time period in which this movie is set. So I definitely think that, you know, she's putting herself and her family in this movie, or at least her family's friends into this movie. So yeah, I think that is one of the only interesting takeaways I took from this, because yeah, otherwise I just found it mostly insufferable. And God, I mean, the biggest thing for me was just like the really, really awful attempts at like shock value, where it was like this movie is so glacially paced, but then it's like every time she felt like the audience had any chance of getting bored, she's like, oh look, he's drinking cum water, or like he's dancing with his dick waggling around, or oh look, he's eating this girl out while she's on her period. Isn't that shocking? And it was just like, so awful.
Yeah, that's the thing. HBO has taken us beyond degeneracy like this. You got to try harder, Emeralds. There's got to be something that you've heard of at a party or witnessed yourself that you could have put in here that was a little edgier, a little more extreme than what we got. Even though I will say the cum water part fucked me up. The slurping sound was the most awful sound I've ever had to hear in my life. I'm just going to put that out there. That was terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty gross. And, you know, I've heard now at this point, I don't know if you've heard about the candles that it's inspired.
No.
No, yeah, okay. Well, I'll just say this sort of, there are now like Saltburn cum bathwater candles that you can buy online, and I guess they sold out pretty quick from what I heard.
Oh God. And here's another thing that I find bonkers on that note, because this has kind of set off a sensation in the land, as it were. And I thought I had added this in, but it looks like I missed it. But I took a screenshot of a YouTuber who, she's one of those gals that does the, like, a chronically online girl talks about Vampire Diaries for 12 hours straight videos. Okay. She's one of those people. And she already has like a 3-hour-long Saltburn lore document video that she has uploaded. And I'm like, how do you have 3 hours worth of things to say about this movie? That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, same. It's inexplicable. And yeah, I mean, the only reason I'm glad I didn't pay anything for it, but yeah, I guess if you got Amazon Prime, you know, you could kill a night watching this and being disgusted. But as I said during our Christmas episode, you know, this is not one to put on with the parents.
Definitely not. And like, but to that point, like, can you imagine being the person who paid $25 to, you know, own or stream this while it was still in theaters? What, honey?
Yeah, no thanks. I mean, I'm glad that I never got roped into seeing this one in theaters, because, you know, again, this is one of those movies that, you know, from a filmmaking perspective, I find it inexplicable, but also from a reaction perspective, because this, I think, has like a 70-something on Rotten Tomatoes and like a 60-something on Metacritic. So I don't know, like, I don't know what those people saw in it. I believe it's probably one of those movies that, you know, people were afraid, especially in the early goings when there wasn't a lot of opinions out there about it. People were afraid to like shit on it too hard because they didn't know, you know, whether this was high art or not. And so, yeah, the reaction to it from a critical perspective is inexplicable to me. And yeah, well, I watch it for free, I guess, but not in any other aspect would I recommend this. So yeah, I was just finishing up, Chuck. I don't know, you want to move on?
Absolutely. Thank you for riffing while I washed off a giant ass candy cane to give to my child at 10 o'clock in the morning. We got some quick hits here. This is stuff that we're going to be talking more at length on, or have spoken on already. I finally got to see The Holdovers. Loved this movie. Wholeheartedly recommend it. I have so much that I could say about it, but it's yeah, one of my favorites of the year. the acting and the writing, the way that it approaches its setting, super authentic and honest. Like there's nothing that's like hyperbolic or fake about it. Really, really enjoyed it. It's just a simple, lovely little film. Very happy that it exists. And you of course have already spoken about it, so I'll accelerate because that's the extent of what I have to say. Up next year, yeah, Godzilla Minus One, another one that I am late to the party on. But what I appreciate about this one, in comparison especially to the Western Godzilla canon, is this a great reminder that you can have human characters in these things, but actually give them genuine human stories that aren't that just don't like. I know that there's human peril and there's loved ones in distress and shit like that. They do that, but at the core of the movie, it's not just, oh, my dad abandoned me. He dad mean. Like I know that's kind of what I don't know. Maybe I'm being disingenuous or something here, but genuinely, the human story at the core of this for the main character makes the movie work so completely, and I just appreciated it so much. Like the kamikaze pilot having to regain his honor and bravery and his manhood in a way, or whatever it is, just it worked so effectively, and they executed that ending so perfectly. I want them to just keep making, like, can we have Godzilla Zero next? Can we have a continuity like that? I'll take it. Really, really, happy with it. Just mad that I couldn't have seen it to talk about it with you more. But we'll save that for the end of the year. And then you got to watch Anatomy of a Fall.
Yeah, so again, this is one I'm not going to say a ton on right now because this one may or may not be on my best of the year list. And if I wasn't aware of this, but this is written by Arthur Harari, the director and writer of my favorite film from last year, Onada, 10,000 Nights in the Jungle. So I guess if you needed any indication of whether or not I would love this, I did love this. And if people don't know, this is the part English, part French film about a woman who basically becomes the sole suspect in her husband's death. And essentially her whole life and her relationship with her husband is put on trial in front of the media, in front of the jury, and also in front of her son, who's there to watch the whole trial. And this is like a courtroom drama, but I want to sort of dispel everyone's notion as to what that means, because there's no like last second monologue that wins the case. People aren't giving these like impassioned speeches and like constantly yelling objection, and there isn't like a smoking gun piece of evidence that introduces a twist to the story. It's just a very, very well done sort of like procedural courtroom drama. It's very methodical in taking this woman's life basically apart, and there are just some fantastic performances here. Sandra Huller, I mean, people have already gone on about her. She's in two of the best movies this year, between this and Zone of Interest, and this is probably going to rocket her to becoming a star, would be my guess. But then I also want to call out one of the best child performances I've ever seen in a movie, and that's from her son, played by an actor named Milo Mikado Grenier. The work he is doing is crazy. I've always wondered, how do you get such a dark, disturbing, emotional performance out of a 12-year-old? Because it's something you can expect from an adult actor, because they've done enough in their life, they've had enough life experience that they can draw on those emotions to sort of give what a performance needs. But I think when I see a performance like this from a child, I'm like, what type of fucked up shit has this kid gone through that allows him to have such like a dark performance? And so, yeah, that was fantastic. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now. This one may come up again, but yeah, that's where I'll leave it.
Right on. All right. Now we're going to move on to the main event. Matt, why don't you take it away for the Iron Claw? Give me your best wrestling promo for the Iron Claw.
Oh God, no, oh man, I would not. I cannot make a convincing enough promo what's his name, Dixon in the movie. I can't remember which Von Erich he played, but yeah, the Iron Claw is, from the get-go, I wondered what sort of spin that noted weirdo director Sean Durkin would put on this story, because this is the guy who brought us the very strange film The Nest and the ultra cynical biting series Dead Ringers. So what was he going to do for a biopic about a cursed dynasty of wrestlers? But the Iron Claw wasn't quite what I expected, but not really in a negative sense. There's a bit of dramatic license that he's putting into it, some flirting with the otherworldly, but otherwise, this is a fairly conventional, very well done drama. And I don't think it's completely without its faults. There's some sort of hokiness with some of the dialogue. There's some very jarring, obvious trimming of the movie's running time. I could definitely tell. There's definitely some footage on the cutting room floor with this one, but other than that, I think most of all, this acts as a showcase of Zac Efron. I think this film finally puts to bed those sad few people who still hold on to High School Musical, or hold it over the guy's head as they did with Twilight and Robert Pattinson. And so if you are one of those people who in the year 2024 is still wondering if Zac Efron can act, I think the answer is yes. After this film, he can. And so that's where I'll kind of leave it. Yeah, Chuck, what did you think of the Iron Claw?
Yeah, I guess while it does do some things that are unconventional and, definitely played with my expectations a little bit, I still felt a little cheated, I guess. And because so much of the actual triumph and tragedy of this family is relegated to happening off screen. The way that some of the different parts of this movie flow together were just so languid and fluid, and it glosses over so much. Especially I'm coming from the frame of reference of having seen somewhat recently the Dark Side of the Ring episode, once again about the Von Erich family. And so I'm no expert, but I have been consuming a lot of what the experts are saying about this movie. And the general feeling is, yeah, it gets the emotional truth right. It gets a lot of the things right about these guys too. But at the same time, it cheapens certain facts, and and I feel like it undermines the overall experience when things just aren't quite laid out coherently. To go from Carrie beating Flair to a long dark highway, and then you just flash ahead. Yeah, that's probably easier from a filmmaking standpoint. I understand the choice, but there needed to be more meat on them bones for this story, because I could see where there wasn't something there that I expected, I guess. So, I mean, it's like if someone knew beat for beat the Elvis story. I imagine that Priscilla basically did for the Elvis story what the Iron Claw does for the Von Erich story. Am I wrong in that?
No, I would say, yeah, there's definitely some parallels there. I mean, I think Priscilla is even shorter than, I think Priscilla tops out at an hour and 45 minutes.
Wow.
So that is it's really, really jumping around. But then again, that only really has to cover about a, I don't want to say a 10-15 year time frame. I think what is this? Is this about the same, or is it more? I think it's more, right?
Yeah, it's basically from the late 70s, 79 until early 90s.
Okay, so yeah. About the same then, I guess. But yeah, you can definitely tell, that there is definitely some more footage. I mean, this isn't the longest movie either. It's, I think, 2 hours and 10 minutes. So I probably could have done with another 10-15 minutes, and it probably would have served the movie, because if people don't know too, they did a lot with this story to try and sort of fit it to the screen better. And the most noticeable thing is they cut a complete brother out
Yeah.
of the movie, Chris
Yeah.
Von Erich. And so some people have been kind of pissed about that, but in the end, it didn't really bother me that much because, yeah, I think it probably would have made the movie worse because it would have
miserable.
Yeah, it would have felt more scattered. I think, and so yeah, it didn't really bother me too much.
It would have just been another sequence where they have to show a son committing suicide and that family having to grieve about it. I feel like they got the point across. The supporting cast in this is outstanding for the for the most part, especially Moria Tierney. That scene with the black dress was just soul shattering. Mm-hmm. Like we just had a death in our community that was pretty shocking on Christmas Eve, and Angie had to go cover that funeral. And when she's at a funeral, she can't help but cry. And like I was just when I watched this, I was that fucking broke me. I'll just say that. Yeah. But then I don't know, like the casting though I think is critically wrong in a specific area.
Yeah, I'm curious. You made a note about this, and I wanted to know what you thought about this.
And I have felt this way since the casting was announced. But when you look at the face of the actual Carrie Von Erich, do you know who I see? Zac Efron. When I look at the face of the actual Kevin Von Erich, do you know who I see? Jeremy Allen White. Those dudes should have swapped roles. And I know Efron's the bigger star. He is the guy. You just they would have had to have made Carrie's role a lot more substantial, if Efron had been in the role, but it just took me out of it because this guy's face is so Cro-Magnon looking now, like he's Mickey Rourked himself. He's not like Pats has just committed himself artistically to alienating anyone who would have liked him before, but with Efron, I don't know, like, what's going on with him and why he did what he did, but the effect is jarring. And if he hadn't done that to himself, if he had been like Baywatch Zac Efron, I would have accepted it. But now he just looks way too much like the dude wearing pit vipers, from the 80s, and he could have really pulled off what Carrie was going through just as good as Jeremy Allen White did. But they probably would have given him more to work with because White is wasted. He's barely in this movie and he barely says anything, apart from, his downfall. And in fact, them taking away the Ric Flair, Carrie Von Erich match in Texas Stadium was probably budget issues up the wazoo. Because how do you fake 40,000 people in a football stadium? It's very expensive to do that, but that I missed that. Like they didn't give us enough of the highs of the story. They wallowed in the lows, which is I guess totally fine, but I don't know. I was ruined by knowing too much, I think.
Sure. Yeah. To speak a little bit about Efron and his sort of look, I think it's a combination of things. I mean, it's a combination of things he did for the movie and then things in his real life. Because for the movie, I think he did a bunch of spray tanning and then his stupid late 70s haircut. But then in real life, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I don't know this for sure, but it's pretty obvious that Zac Efron has had plastic surgery or at least like Botox, and so
fillers of some kind or something.
Yeah, and so I think that's probably what makes him look so weird and so like just strange. Yeah, Cro-Magnon, I think is how you put it. And so but yeah, I mean, I think you made a good point there where the movie doesn't take enough time to sort of appreciate the highs of these guys' lives, because it spends a lot of time sort of wallowing in the lows. And to speak on the highs for a second, I absolutely loved that the like rush Tom Sawyer sequence, I guess is what I'll call it, because that was one of the scenes that just like really struck a nerve with me, really like just made me feel awesome. Because if people don't know, I'm referring to the scene where the youngest Von Erich brother like rips open a vinyl of Rush's Tom Sawyer, and he puts it on the stereo, and then all the other brothers like get drawn to it. They come in from working out, and then it like immediately cuts to them walking out to it as their walkout music, and then like a triple clothesline. And I just thought that was a really well done sequence. That was one of the highs for me of this movie. But then yes, it didn't really reach those heights ever again. I would say. What did you think? I mean, a scene that was supposed to be one of those moments, but I don't know if it really ever got there for me, was the actual Ric Flair match that we sort of see. And yeah, what did you think of that?
You know, and I don't really understand why the wrestling community is like, they hate it, because they're shitting on the wrestling, despite Chavo Guerrero, you know, Eddie Guerrero's nephew, the wrestler, being like the coach and the consultant for that. Whatever was going on in that scene, people didn't appreciate. They also didn't appreciate the guy playing Flair. You know, just because
that's what I hear.
Because he just didn't really look the part. He did his best, but I don't know. It's tough to expect a dude to play that guy. You know, I think, because like he has to really, you have to do Austin Butler level, like work, as an actor to be able to make that happen. I think. Again, Ric Flair deserves his own fucking movie, frankly. And they deprive. I don't know which fight I would have rather seen, but it gets so out of control in that, and like you kind of alluded to, I'm not sure how realistic it is for him to just lose control like that. Was he losing control? Was it a part of the work? Was he breaking from the script? Like what was supposed to happen? Because they do so many of those things right when they're in the ring, usually, like when he's fighting that race guy and he's like giving him instructions under his breath. Like it really felt inside, like whatever that inside the ring or whatever it was. You're all done with that? Okay, go put it on the counter.
Yeah. The wrestling was at times it was good, and at times it was almost confusing, because that Flair match, I just didn't really understand what was supposed to be going on there, as far as like if he was still working within the confines of like wrestling sort of etiquette of not actually trying to hurt the person, but then afterwards he's sitting there like stewing and just is pissed, and then Ric Flair walks in and cracks a beer and says, "I'll wrestle you anytime." And so that was, I didn't really know what was supposed to be going on there, we were supposed to be, as an audience, how we were supposed to be feeling.
Well, I think that's all. If we're looking at it, I'm trying to give this movie the benefit of the doubt. That's the point where he is realizing Kevin is realizing what it's going to take for him to make it in the business. It's going to mean kind of compromising his soul. Because like if you listen to the real Kevin Von Erich today, like if he continues performing, he has such a soft, like hippie-like voice. He's so chilled out because he lives in Hawaii, and like who wouldn't be zenned out if you lived on a beautiful property in Hawaii? And I think that's just his realization of, I can go full Ric Flair and be the heavyweight champion and always be on TV and always get worked, but it's going to involve really giving up a lot more of myself. And I think maybe you alluded to that. It's a man hollowing himself out and finally realizing he has nothing else to give.
Yeah.
Not right now.
I'd say so.
Why don't you run around the island?
One of the things, I guess we've sort of skated around it a bit, but one of the things that we haven't covered at all that I think we should is Holt McCallany as the elder Von Erich. And I'm curious, what you thought of his performance, and then also what you think of, if there is any awards campaigning that's going on for this film, it's for him. He's getting all the, best actor, sort of ads in like the the Vanity Fairs and the Varieties of the world, and all of the award effort is going towards him. And I'm wondering what you think of that, if you think there's anybody else that deserves, is just as deserving or even more deserving than him, and what you thought of his performance in general.
Well, his performance in general is fine. I don't know, like there were moments where you can tell he's in Holt mode, and he's just rattling off his lines just like he would for Mindhunter or any other TV show he's on. But then there are some moments where you can tell, oh yeah, he's giving you some juice, and it's usually when he's just kind of like, staring laser beams into his sons, like when he's just like quietly rageful. It's when Efron's fucking up the promo he's supposed to cut. And there's just that shot of him just smoldering, in the darkness. Like, I loved that kind of thing from him. But like I've alluded to, I think Tierney really deserves some plaudits. 1 second, honey, I'll get you one.
Yeah, she was great. Unfortunately, I don't think she was probably in enough of the film that people, would give her any sort of. I mean, maybe supporting actress, but. She really has I think from what I remember, 2 scenes that she even really says more than a line or two. But yeah, she was great. And yeah, otherwise, I thought McElhenney was fine. I would personally, if I could only give, let's say hypothetically, I could only give one person in this entire movie the awards sort of push. It probably would be Efron, honestly. Okay. Just because, he's the one who has the most screen time. I think he not even to speak about the physical transformation that he did to his body. He probably took loads and loads of steroids to do this movie. But also, I just thought his performance was really, really great. And I really do hope that this pushes him over the edge of like people finally taking him seriously, because he really didn't do his career any favors by his early career, being in like a bunch of like Disney stuff. And then his middle career was just a lot of like R-rated comedies and stuff. And so he really, I think he's doing a better job of picking his roles now. And so I hope this pushes him over the edge.
Well, and that's what I mean. He's like I said, he Mickey Rourked himself, but that could be a positive thing too. You go from being a heartthrob, and then people start, taking your humanity a little more seriously and stop objectifying you for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm trying to.
We've been dancing around the high strangeness. What the fuck did you think of the afterlife sequence?
Yeah, that was interesting because, if people don't know, the movie is pretty typical conventional biopic, but then we get this one scene that shows Carrie sort of in a boat. It's very Greek mythology-esque, river Styx having the coin to pay, Charon, and then he gets to his other brothers who have already passed and sort of, reunites with them. And yes, very, very, it was odd, but once I sort of figured out what was going on, I didn't mind it. I thought it was, it was one of those scenes that was there to sort of induce more tears, and I think it did its job for the most part. I personally had a bigger problem with the last scene of the film, which we'll get to, but yeah, what did you think of the afterlife scene?
Yeah, I laughed. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't cry at that moment. I found it a little hokey.
Yeah.
No, is he? No, hang on, honey. I found it a little hokey, but I understand why it was there, but they kind of set that up. Did you notice it's during Carrie's Ric Flair match when they show the mom sitting watching it on the TV, and you're just in the house, and
on the stairs.
Yeah. And David's sitting there on the stairs. There needed to be more of that. Like, there was just that was the only time it happened leading up to the afterlife sequence. I think they could have played more with the idea of grief and haunted houses, but not like in a spooky ooky kind of way, but just the things that linger after someone dies. They could have done a lot more with that. I really liked that. I did a double take. But
to be honest, I completely forgot about that until you mentioned it. But yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. And yeah, that That would have been great. That would have been awesome because, yeah, I think it would have helped to set up that afterlife scene too a little bit more so that it perhaps wouldn't have come off as hokey. The one scene I had just alluded to it, but the scene that I thought just kind of came off really, really just like cheesy to me was the literal like final scene where
Yeah.
Efron he's watching his boys and he starts crying. And I thought, we as an audience, we knew what was going on there. We knew what, the emotions he was trying to convey with him just sitting there watching his boys, tears coming down his eyes. But then they sort of had to ruin it by having them like come over to him and be like, dad, what's wrong? And then he's like, oh, just missing my brothers. And then they're like, we'll be your brother, dad. And it just was, yeah, too much.
It was,
too much.
yeah, no, there's been quite a few times this year where I've just wished that they had just hit cut just a few seconds sooner than they do it, or a few minutes sooner than they do it. And I agree with you. Like, that would have been a lot more impactful and a lot less lame, because like at times this movie goes like into the really artsy, really like, like mature and nuanced choice. And then other times it just goes right into like Hallmark schlock. It just, it's really dissonant that way.
Yeah, for sure.
There's pictures in there.
Yeah, we've said a lot that is both good and bad about the movie, but yeah, as we sort of, I guess, come to a close here, I do want to say it is totally worth seeing, especially if you're like a wrestling fan. I do think it is, as far as conventional biopics go, I think this is among the better ones this year. And once you finish watching the dramatized version of this story, go and watch the episode of the Vice series Dark Side of the Ring that is about the Von Erichs. It's free on YouTube. You literally just have to search Von Erich Dark Side of the Ring, and the whole episode is on YouTube for free. So yeah, go watch that, because that is totally worth watching.
Absolutely. Like I said, I watched it like shortly after seeing the movie. And so, yeah, but I already remembered a lot of those details going in. And ultimately, though, I feel like this does have a lot of integrity. It delivers for the most part. And if we're going to get a wrestling movie, I'll from anybody, like anything, this is as good as we're going to get. And you'll probably be able to watch it for yourself on HBO, because 824 sold their soul to HBO.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Moving on to our mentionables for the year. What's your two main recommendations that you have for people?
Yeah, so in the year of 2023, my number one mentionable, and I know this is, probably I'm among a long line of people who have said this, but Baldur's Gate 3, one of the best games of the year, one of the best games of the decade, I would say. I mean, really, the last time, like genuinely, I feel like I was this invested in a game's writing and making choices in a game, and just a group of characters had to be like Mass Effect 2. Like, I haven't been this invested in a game. Yeah, it was a long, not since then has a game made me this invested. And so, I mean, there's much to be said, but what I will say is that, this is one of the best CRPG experiences that you can have. Especially, it's an experience that can be both gratifying and heartbreaking, especially if you're not save scumming. You will have a lot of heartbreak. And, in the end, when everything was said and done and I beat the game, I rode off into the sunset with my frog wife, and it was pretty incredible. So yeah, that's my number one. And then my number two mentionable of the year is and I actually never mentioned this one before, but inspired by the Apple TV Plus series, I went and read the entire Silo trilogy of books written by Hugh Howey. And if you want to talk about another satisfying experience, I really hope this TV show keeps getting renewed, because we need, this series of books in television form, because it goes places. And if you're somebody who watched season 1 of Silo and are afraid that the book, you'll be treading too much of the same ground with the book, I'm happy to tell you that season 1 of the show only covers like the first like 125 pages of this 500-page book. So
wow, what the
you
fuck?
really, yeah,
That's unique.
You do not have to, yeah, you do not have to worry about that happening. And I read the entire trilogy, and it's totally worth reading. And so yeah, those are my mentionables of the year. Right
on. Baldur's Gate 3. I'm still trying to find time for that Minx. It's just such a commitment. But I got some recent gifts that might make it more feasible. But I'm happy to hear that the series has a solid foundation. The Apple TV series, I mean. Because if I ever get a chance to read those, I may just. But because what I read this last year were the surprise 2 volumes of what was supposed to be a 2-volume book, now a 3-volume book. But the End and the Death volume 1 and 2 from the Siege of Terra series, from the Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40K. We're finally here. We're at the finish line, and they keep like throwing down more road. Dan Abnett just has too much to write, and it's all so good. I don't know. Some people in this, who like read this shit more than I do, really hate what Dan Abnett does, because he'll have some chapters that are like 8 paragraphs long, and then like some that are more traditionally length. And there's just so many characters, and there's just so much happening. How can you possibly track it? But that's part of what I enjoy so much about it, and just the sheer fucking brutality of its imagery. It's second to none. Like the Sanguinius's death is like one of the best things I've read in years. And if we ever get there with Henry Cavill's Warhammer thing that he's doing, I don't know who the fuck he's gonna play in this. There's just too many characters that he could be. But if turn it back on, please. I got a little light girl and she's messing up everything. But yeah, really recommend these. I know that this is not for everyone. This is like deep nerd shit, but it's fun to have really like mythic writing with like a lot of grandiosity to it and scale, and and it's delivering. It's giving me all of the unanswered things that I didn't know I needed from this. But if I have a recommendation for everyone to do this year, it's to buy yourself a fucking Steamdeck, okay? Yeah. Get yourself a mobile gaming PC of some variety, whether it's an Asus, Rogue, whatever the fuck it's called, our Ally, or the Legion Go, whatever it is MSI's releasing, whatever it is Qualcomm is going to be making with Sony. Like there's a lot of neat things happening in this marketplace, this part of the marketplace rather, because it's been like Christmas Day every time I get to pick this thing up. I got it for my birthday in March, so it's not like I haven't even had it a full year, but I got a dock from Angie for Christmas, and it just arrived from China, and I didn't realize like what I was missing out on and what the future really is for this. Because like someday, instead of buying an Xbox or a PlayStation, you're just gonna buy. You're gonna buy this
to connect it to your TV, correct?
Yeah, and it outputs to 4K. Or it's healthier to put it only at 1080p, just for the sake of, if you're playing AAA gaming, you're like Baldur's Gate, you're probably not gonna survive trying to play that, like on high settings. Right now, I just tried playing that this like last night, and it was so fuzzy. There's something I need to fix within the settings. So buyer beware. There's a lot of finicking that goes on when you're trying to do very specific things. But in general, this like rejuvenated my love for gaming. It actually made certain games more intuitive and easier to play. Having it be in that handheld format, having that gyroscope. I just can't recommend these things enough. They are so cheap right now because they're trying to get rid of the LCD model stock to make way for the OLED version that they just released. And you can get a base model of this for like $300 and have like $600 to like $800 worth of computing power that you can stow easily. You can pick up and play at any time. Get like they finally have the Amazon game store working more functionally, and that just blew open all the games that I can play. And I can play the original Baldur's Gate games that I have on Prime Gaming, like in the original format as they're intended in a handheld, because it has a mouse track thing. You can do everything one-to-one. I just love this thing so much, and I want it to destroy console gaming as we know it. So buy one of those for your family instead, and see the Iron Claw. Even though we had some, up and down, takes, overall positive. You would say, yeah. Mm-hmm. And tune in next week. We're going to be delivering our best of list from 2023. Somewhat belated. Everyone loves to get those things out as soon as they can, but we needed to know. I needed to know if the Iron Claw deserved to be on it, and you'll have to wait and see if it maybe snuck on. Maybe not. Maybe we'll have to find out. Thank you, Matt. It's always good to see you, and take care, everyone, and have a good week.
Yep. See ya.